he brings along his British prisoners for the gladiator ring.
4 years is very standard for a person to be in command of a province or of an army like that, and then somebody else would come in. You don't want a person to be in command for too long in case the troops become too attached to their commander. And if that happens, they may get ideas that maybe this commander would make a good emperor.
3rd century historian Dio.
In the gladiatorial combats, many persons took part, including the British captives. Plautius used up ever so many men in this part of the spectacle and took pride in the fact.
The blood sport of the arena confirms the superiority of every Roman heart. The barbarians are dust beneath their feet. In 47 AD, the Romans claim much of the southern part of Britain. Some leaders, like Queen Cartimandua of the Brigantes, come into the imperial fold voluntarily. But many choose to fight, like the rebel prince Caradicus.
The work of pacifying a population to the point where Roman armies could be removed from a province was an arduous process. The Romans must have taken a very long-term view to the process of annexation and conquest.
They must when facing a charismatic opponent like Caradicus.
Caradicus may have had the most significant of these rebellions. He seems to have been able to combine most of the British people, and they have successes.
The Romanized villages reel under Caradicus's audacious attacks. His surprising string of victories makes him first among British chieftains. All look to him to push the invaders from their shores. In November, when he learns that a new Roman governor is assigned to Britannia, Caradicus launches his most virulent assault yet. The new governor, Scapula, receives a bloody welcome to his province. But things do not go as Caradicus predicts. The Roman troops never waver. Scapula deals Caradicus his first major defeat of the insurgency. Still, the rebel leader remains defiant. Caradicus retreats to southern Wales and sparks an uprising there instead. As it spreads north through the hill country, Scapula pulls the 9th Legion out of Brigantes and heads west. All he finds are women and children. The rebels have vanished like smoke into the hills.
The Welsh Rebellion flourished as almost all rebellions in Wales will flourish down through the early modern period, simply because it's hard to get to the rebels. Now they have to go into the mountains and the woods and the islands and find where these rebels are and then take them out.
It's actually not unlike the situation that American soldiers found themselves in popular histories of Vietnam, where the Americans found themselves fighting in jungle terrain, where the quality of their training elsewhere didn't prepare them for the ability of the enemy to melt into the background.
Scapula's solution is to obliterate their hiding places. He destroys every rebel village and presses forward. But behind him, treachery strikes, threatening a second rebellion. In the forest of the Brigantes, the Druids are gathering.
The people of the Brigantes see the Romans heading into Wales, which is very difficult territory, and said, well, this is a good opportunity. I mean, when they're busy over there, we can cause trouble in the rear and perhaps gain an advantage. Maybe if they're caught between two forces, they'll be destroyed.
To make this second rebellion work, one noble is vital, Venusius, husband of the collaborator Queen Cartimandua.
Venusius, Cartimandua's husband, of course, was a significant figure. He didn't hold a hereditary position in his own right, but he was perhaps the most highly visible male leader in the kingdom. And as such, his breaking ranks with his wife provided a very significant focus for anybody with aspirations to rebellion.
The rebellious nobles discuss Venusius's name and loyalty. Who, after all, would benefit more if his wife, the queen, is overthrown? But they underestimate Cartimandua's reach. She has spies everywhere. When the names of the ringleaders are revealed by her husband's own manservant, she learns that her most valuable warriors are in the plot. Desperate, she turns to Rome.
Client kings and queens, chieftains that support the Romans are supporting them because the Romans have worked out some kind of arrangement. In other words, we will come to your aid, and it's kind of an ongoing arrangement.
Through the Roman envoy, she sends word to Scapula. He must return to Brigantes immediately and honor Rome's pledge to protect her. The timing couldn't be worse for Scapula. He has no choice but to pull out of Wales and march the 9th Legion back east to support the Queen. His departure creates an opening for Caradicus and the Welsh rebels. With the Romans withdrawing, warriors rally to Caradicus from all over Britain. They bring their weapons, ancient beliefs, and their families. This time, the resistance will not hit and run. Caradicus orders his troops to dig in. Classical court historian Tacitus.
He selected a site where numerous factors helped him and impeded us, and all defenses were strongly manned.
And an entrenched defensive position like that gives a huge advantage to the defender, and he'd every reason to believe, perhaps on this occasion, given these circumstances, that he had chosen the ground and he had prepared the ground, maybe the Romans would falter. I think that Caradicus had a reasonable expectation that he could win.
The last chance for British independence hangs on that fragile hope. In the name of the Emperor Claudius, Rome enters the 6th year of the bitter conquest of Britain.
The Roman emperor was imagined, and in fact functioned, very broadly speaking, as commander-in-chief of the Roman Empire. The emperor was ultimately conceived to be responsible for the success or failure of virtually any enterprise by the Roman state.
Continuing chaos in Britain could cast a shadow on Claudius's tenuous hold on the throne. Cartimandua, Rome's client queen in the north, demands that the empire defend her against her rebellious subjects. She and her followers barricade themselves in her stronghold, waiting for Roman general Scapula to rescue her. In short order, Scapula crushes her rebellious subjects and brings her the head of its leader. The royal consort Venusius is outraged. His sympathy for the resistance grows stronger. At last, Scapula marches to Wales with the 9th Legion once more. Desperate to finish off Caradicus, he doubles his troop complement, ordering the 20th Legion out of Camalodunum as well. In 50 AD, with the honor of the empire weighing on him, Scapula leads thousands of the most highly trained men on earth against a well-entrenched and determined enemy.
It might have been possible for a man like Scapula to persuade Claudius that failure under the particular circumstances would have been acceptable. But basically what was at stake, beyond, say, life and death, was his chance for a further post after this one.
Failure is not an option, but victory will not be easy. classical biographer Tacitus.
Our soldiers reached the rampart, but in an exchange of missiles, they came off worse in wounds and casualties.
The Romans simply regroup and come on once more.
Rome takes over. Rome becomes Rome, the war machine, and there's no future for the rebellion. And that's precisely how history played out.
So they really wanted to get to grips with the Britons and finally end this thing. And the vehemence and ferociousness of their assault was such that the Britons were overwhelmed.
The luckiest have the good fortune of a quick death. The rest are soon captured. Humiliation, slavery, and ritual murder await the captives. To his horror, Caratacus realizes his wife and children are among them. Caratacus himself escapes. Remarkably, he flees all the way to the kingdom of Brigantes, even though their queen, Cartimandua, is a Roman collaborator.
Cartimandua's husband, Venutius, is a known patriot and opposed Cartimandua's collaborationist policies with the Romans. I would suggest that Caratacus fled not to Cartimandua, but to Venutius, in the hope of perhaps gaining his support, maybe convincing Cartimandua to turn, finally.
Cartimandua does not bend. She is Rome's creature. The queen trades Caratacus, the hero of the resistance, to cement her position as a friend of Rome. The betrayal disgusts her husband Venutius. Paraded through the streets of Rome, Caratacus and his family thrill the citizens. Classical court historian Tacitus.
The reputation of Caratacus had spread beyond the islands and through the neighboring provinces to Italy itself. These people were curious to see the man who had defied our power for so many years. Even at Rome, his name meant something.
This was the symbol of their victory. You know, here's the enemy chieftain marching through our streets in submission.
What normally happened to enemies of Rome was that they were brought into the prison and put into a pit and strangled. But in this instance, it didn't happen. Instead, Caratacus was led to Claudius sitting on a large raised sort of a tribunal or dais, and he gave a stirring speech. And if we believe Tacitus, the speech was about the need to resist domination, and that if he allows Caratacus to live, that he would be a living symbol of Claudius's clemency.
To bestow mercy implies superiority, and above all else, that is how Romans see themselves, as superior. Moved by Caratacus' speech, Claudius grants his celebrity barbarian and all of his family pardon.
He was probably retired to a villa somewhere in the neighborhood of Rome, where he would have lived out his life in relative comfort, but of course lacking freedom. A golden cage.
The assimilation of Caratacus is at last complete. The Romanization of Britain is not so smooth. Within a decade, the rebels rise again, this time with Venutius at their head. Even a century later, the northern border remains untamable.
It never becomes fully Romanized. It's just too far away. And the Romans will eventually, of course, have to build Hadrian's Wall to keep out invaders from the north. It's going to be difficult to hold, and finally they'll abandon it. And frankly, there isn't a lot left of Roman rule in Britain.
Conquered to shore up an emperor's reputation, the island drains men and resources for centuries. And when Rome falls at last, Britain will be the first to revert to its barbarian state. Next on Rome, rise and fall of an empire. As the empire ascends to its zenith, its rulers forsake the greater good to chase personal glory. Trajan finds gold in the Transylvanian hills, but ultimately meets wretched defeat.